Warm welcome from all of us at the British Chamber of Commerce for Luxembourg to this session on leaderships in times of crisis, the good, the bad and the ugly. Particularly a warm welcome from the People in Leadership group who are facilitating this event today, and you'll get a chance to speak with people in breakout rooms later on as well. We have a very interactive session with you today, so hopefully lots of food for thought, and we have three people presenting. So I am one of them, Sarah Batty. I am one of the officers of the British Chamber of Commerce, and I also head up the People and Leadership group. With me today are Andy Notter and Donald Venkatapan, and I just ask Andy and Donald to introduce themselves briefly before we get started.
Well, I can go first, Donald. Good morning, everyone. My name's Andrew Notter, and thank you, Sarah, for the quick introduction. I'm also a Vice Chair for the British Chamber of Commerce of Luxembourg, and I work for a company called Anderson Wise as a partner. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Donald Venkatapan. So I'm the managing partner of the law firm Wagner and Associates, and I'm working with the People and Leadership group for a number of years now. And I'm very happy to be here to present this event with you.
Fantastic. Thank you both. So before we dive into the actual topic, I just want to run through a couple of Zoom things with you so that this meeting can run in the smoothest way possible. It's always exciting whether or not the technology will work, but hopefully it will today. So number one, if you wouldn't mind all being on mute while the presenters are speaking, so that we don't hear typing or other noises in the background. You can always unmute yourself if you'd like to speak up, so please feel free to do that. If you're finding the internet connection is poor, you can turn your video off. We'll just see your name, but you might be able to see the slides more easily. In terms of recording, we are recording this event, but we're only recording the speakers. So any situations where more of us are on the screen, that will not be recorded. That will be shared later on the British Chamber's YouTube site. But it will be just us as the presenters who will be visible there. If you have any concerns, do please reach out though afterwards. Then I've got the pictures in front of my next piece of the slides. Let me just move those. Chat box. You can ask questions at any time. We'll be keeping an eye out the questions coming into the chat box. And also there'll be a couple of situations where we'll be asking you to type your thoughts into the chat box. So please take a moment to note where the chat box is so that you can use it later on. You can also send private messages to people if you don't want the whole group to read something. Polling results, we'll be asking you some questions in a poll format. They will be anonymous, so nobody will know how you've voted, so don't let that hold you back. We'd love to get everybody's views on a few topics that we've thought of for today. We will also be having some breakout sessions to give you the opportunity to network. Part of the fun of these sessions is that we can discuss and think about different topics together. So we'll be doing that. We'll be putting you into breakout sessions randomly. There will be a facilitator normally in each room. And then before you come back again, there'll be a sort of a 1-minute warning when the breakout session ends, and then you'll all come back to the larger group together. You may have already done this before with us. And at the end, we're planning for those who would like to run another sort of 15 minutes of breakout sessions for those who would like to use this as a networking opportunity as well. We'll be putting people into, again, random groups just for a few minutes at the end so that you can meet people perhaps that you haven't had a chance to speak to today. All right, I think that's it for technology right now. Let's dive into the subject matter then. Andy, I'll hand over to you.
Thank you, Sarah, and good morning, everyone, once again. So we have a very interesting topic as today, which I'm sure many of you are certainly interested in. It's been a topic of many conversations, the press, and still an ongoing subject of how we navigate the coming weeks, months, perhaps years ahead as well. So ultimately, you can see there's a few quotes from the first slide there about how people are defining leadership. And it said that really, with crisis, it reveals the very good aspects of a leader, but at the same time, it reveals the very worst and bad aspects of a leader. So today's workshop is all about the leadership in times of crisis, the good, the bad, and the very ugly, which I'm sure we've seen good examples of each of those points as well. The current situation is posing a real challenge for leaders currently in many different industries throughout the world, in public, in private, and as you've seen in governments at the same time. Many organizations and families especially are faced with many different challenges, and that's something which I think we're trying to really deal with currently at the moment. So, and it's not over yet. We've got many challenges and certainly many more risks ahead moving forward. But this has really given us a chance to assess leadership in action. How are leaders managing with this crisis? What are they doing? How are they going to manage the future given their current situations with the unknown? So it's really for leaders to understand how they can charter the kind of future and what is this unknown territory that they're going through and how do they deal with that? So there's many different questions which they need to face, and how they deal with those is certainly a massive topic of the moment. So what leadership skills do they need to navigate through these unusual times? How can they enable their teams to thrive when faced with different challenges? And I'm going to start by asking you all one of those different questions at the same time. Sarah, could you pass the next slide? Or Jill?
It should be showing.
Rebecca? Thank you. There we go. Perfect. So if everyone can have a look at that, this is a chance for you to have some impact and for everyone that's listening to see some of the results. We've got a number of questions throughout the workshop that will help us to understand what's happening or what we believe we're seeing currently from leaders. But I'd first of all like you all to have a quick yes or no in terms of how you believe leaders are dealing with the current situation and have they taken the right decision during this time. And we're already getting some quick feedback now. And as you can see, I think we're seeing a number of successful leaders that have managed throughout the current weeks. And that's good signs, I think, especially from a Luxembourg perspective. I think we're happy how people, indeed, someone just saying time will tell, but at the current time, I believe the current decisions that people are making, it seems to be, as you can see rightly, 83% of people currently believe that the leaders and their managers and management in itself are taking the right decisions during this period of time. So let's explore during the workshop what leaders are doing, how are they managing to navigate successfully, and that would be some interesting discussions for the workshop and through the breakout rooms that we'll be discussing in the coming minutes. Sarah, can I pass you over to you?
Absolutely. Let me just close the poll results, which are still on my screen. Great. So it's always interesting to see opinions of this. So it looks like perhaps we have more good than bad and ugly in terms of leadership, at least around us and what we've seen. I'd love to get you thinking about what impact COVID-19 has had on your life in general, because that's going to be some of the things that leaders are having to deal with from their point of view as well. So if you go to the chat box, and what I'll do is I'll stop the screen share, but take a moment to have a look at this question before I leave that. So what impact has COVID-19 had on your work and perhaps your life in general? Go to the chat box and we'll take a look and see what everybody's sharing here in terms of their thoughts and see if we see any trends. So don't be shy. So I can see one comment already that actually yes, no was maybe a little bit simplistic. So there might be some situations in which things are more easily dealt with than others. So what other thoughts do you have on the situation? So what's changed, right? So for example, people might be feeling very anxious in this situation. On the other hand, it's a weird situation because in many ways we have been sort of slowed down. We couldn't go at our normal pace of life, so things may be a little bit calmer. What else are you seeing for your lives and those around you? What's changed? Getting used to working from home, absolutely. I think we all went through a very steep learning curve with how to get organized at home. And also, if you think about leaders, obviously, you know, how do they help their teams who are all working from home as well, manage through this time in our lives as a result of the crisis. Now, I'm going to ask you to go into breakout sessions. These will be randomly assigned groups of about 5 people. And you'll have a facilitator in the room. I'll post the question in a moment in the chat so that everybody has that question in front of them. But essentially, what we would like you to think about in these breakout sessions is really, if you think about leaders that are doing it well, and from our poll results, we had 83% of you who felt that leaders are doing a good job. So what are the very best ones doing? What are the leadership skills that you're observing that gives them that ability to handle this crisis well? And then on the other hand, those leaders that we see who are not doing a great job, so that was the other 17% of the poll, for example, what do we see them doing or perhaps not doing? So what are they missing? So I think what we'd love to do is to get your views on this again. Andrew, do you want to walk us through this one?
Absolutely. So we have a bit more than a yes or no answer to this particular question as well, which is helpful, I think, just to hear the feedback that we've had so far from the breakout rooms. And as you can see, there's a number of different skills that leaders have been using that have enabled their teams and employees or their families to feel certainly more at ease and have managed to deal with the lockdown in a more successful manner. So we've already had some quick feedback on this, I think, but we've mentioned, I think, a few points about how employees or how their teams have felt much more at ease, certainly if they felt part of that team and they put people first. So how have they done that? Have they been creative? Have they motivated their employees, or was it the positive message or particular feedback that people have been receiving from their managers? And of course that can be and Brian, that's a good point. And indeed, we could have a long list of questions and answers here about what provides the right skills for a leader. But what I'm interested in, I suppose, is really what is and has been proven to be one of the most successful skills. And I think communication seems to be certainly leading from that perspective in how you're communicating, how you're leading, and how you're keeping in touch with your employees through this time, and that could be in many different forms. I had a great example in one of the breakout rooms. They received a thank you letter that was received, and also some gifts for their family, and really keeping in contact with them on a very regular basis proved to be very successful for one person in particular. So I think as we've clearly communicated here, communication needs to be, of course, one of the most important aspects of any leader's skill set to make sure they are successful in managing any crisis. And there was one good example actually that was given before that was about dealing with pre-thinking about the crisis, that what people put in place before the crisis. Were they working from home? Did they have the right technology? And of course that is dealing with leadership before the crisis, but I think how they're managing that throughout the period of time and ongoing is going to be through communication. So I think that highlights clearly what skill out of what I've put there so far is the most important.
Great, thanks for that. It's always interesting to see the majority view on these questions. Donald, I think it's over to you right now.
Yes, indeed, and I looked for good examples or examples of great leadership in this time of crisis, and I noted 2 female leaders that were praised for their communication in different ways. I will explain myself a little bit further, but we will start with Jessica Harden. I have a little video to show you her communication skills.
Right, it's 1 minute, and hopefully the sound will work for you all.
Today there are no active cases in New Zealand. We have tested almost 40,000 people for COVID-19 in the past 17 days and none have tested positive. We have had no one in hospital for COVID-19 for 12 days. It's been 40 days since the last case of community transmission, 22 days since that person finished their self-isolation. And so today I can announce that Cabinet has agreed we will now move to level 1 to get our economy fully open again and we will start almost immediately. We moved down to COVID-19 alert level 1 from midnight tonight.
What was your immediate reaction when you heard there were no active cases of COVID-19 remaining in New Zealand?
I did a little dance. Definitely not. I showed Neve. She was caught a little by surprise, but she joined in, having absolutely no idea why I was dancing around the lounge, but enjoying it nonetheless.
So that's exactly the type of message that we want to hear. And the positiveness of that message really shows that the leader in that type of situation has to, I would say, find engagement and have this proximity with the audience is really welcome in this time of crisis. The second example I had was Angela Merkel. And Angela Merkel had a I would say, different approach. She didn't address to the German nation for a number of years. She had very few attendance in TV shows. So she gave a speech, a very quite calm and confident speech at the beginning of March, and she managed to embrace quite a lot of and to change, I would say, the views of German people on this and obtain confidence of the German population on this. And that's quite a good example of how in this, and I had the same discussion within my Breakout group. In terms of communication, that's where that in time of crisis, the leader has to step up. He has to show that he is the person in charge, and his decisiveness is the positivity that he may express will help the people to deal with the situation. And that's the two examples I wanted to share with you, and we will be able to talk about them later in breakout rooms. But I think these two examples of two different personalities really show how the great leader may lead in this time of crisis.
Today.
Thank you, Donald. No, that's a good point. You know, you don't all need to have the same style, but using the right skills in your own style can really help in this situation. So preparing this session, I was sort of looking around the internet, you know, at crisis leadership and what are the do's and don'ts. And I came across a very nice overview actually from April in the Harvard Business Review. So I'd just like to show you what they're suggesting as the four key areas. And interestingly, as I've been listening, I think that actually everything that we've talked about sort of slots somewhere into these four different points that they mentioned. So it's a good article also for you to go back to if you want to read about this in more detail. So their first point was that it's just important to make some kind of decision. It doesn't need to be the perfect decision, but it does need to be some kind of a decision. And really to think about what are the key things that we need to do as a business, for example, or as a country, to really make sure that you're not pushing that decision forward. Now, and particularly if you think about the COVID situation, every day where a decision wasn't made meant that the situation was going to get worse. So it was actually better to do something rather than wait to get it perfectly right, but because at that point in time it was going to be too late. Also, for a leader, you know, value this doing something over getting it right. So don't punish the mistakes that might be made along the way, but actually accept that they've happened, find ways to come up with new solutions, but don't make people scared of doing things by punishing potential mistakes. That's not the right way forward in a crisis situation. The second piece is adapt boldly. So don't try and do what you've always done. And if we've talked about the fact that companies suddenly had their workforces mainly working from home. They maybe didn't have the technical ability to do so. So there have been massive changes that companies and organizations have had to go through. So there was not really, it wasn't really the best approach to try and continue to do business as usual, because that probably wouldn't have worked out. So number one in that situation is to think about, well, what actually doesn't need to be done? What shouldn't we need to do? Put that on hold and focus on those key things that we need to. Also, they say that the value of networking is particularly important in this time. because you can learn from others. You can hear how other people have made their decisions, what's worked for them, what hasn't worked for them. So although we're sort of in a situation where everybody's sort of on their own, at home in their sort of own space, this idea of reaching out to others and having that social network and that business network, that organizational network, those are actually really, really important things to bear in mind that can help through a crisis. Reliably deliver. So once you've got your priorities, you know what you're not going to be working on. You would have your KPIs, your key performance indicators, and you would try and work to those. Now, one thing that they mentioned in this article that I thought was really interesting, and they called it out, is this idea of self-care. So you can only really deliver reliably if you do take that time to look after yourself, to make sure that you are well, that you are healthy, that you are sane, I guess, in these days. So really seeing that as a business need. And I think that echoes some of what we heard in the breakout groups as well, that great leaders really are doing that. They are making sure that people are looking after themselves, and that they as leaders are looking after others as well. So self-care is definitely a business need in this day and age. And then last but not least, and we've spent some time already talking about that, is really making sure that your communication is impactful. In particular, that it's very compassionate, that you're showing kindness to others. Everybody has a different level of anxiety in this situation for various reasons. And as a leader, to be able to engage with others in a way that's useful to them and useful to the organization, I guess, at the end of the day as well, is a key skill. So I think we did touch on all of those. So it's just nice to see them in summary here again. So from here, we have got, I think, one more poll question for you, and we will also have one more breakout session. I just wanted to check in, see if there are any questions at all in the meantime. I'll stop sharing this slide, and just if anybody has a question, we can check the chat box right now if you want.
Thank you, Sarah. So last question for this morning as well, just to get some further feedback. So we've heard about the communication style and what people are looking for. So what kind of message would you most like to hear from a leader in times of crisis? So we have inspirational. Do you want to be the person that needs to hear that inspirational message that everything's going to be okay and we're going to manage through the crisis? Do you want them to provide some creative solutions for you? Is it the positive message that you want to listen to? Or is it that you need to be empowered, but at the same time with an honest message and communication? Now, all of these are, of course, slightly linked, but I'm interested to see what you would most like to hear from these points. So I think we've got already, if a number of people have not answered, I think we're almost there, so 95%. So as you can see, yeah, inspirational, certainly an interesting and certainly an important aspect for what people are looking for. But still, people need to know, they need to be clear, and I think someone mentioned it earlier as well, the vulnerability. If they don't know, they're honest enough to say that they don't know this situation, and they've made a mistake, and they're able to make the actions to change that, and how they would see the future and the actions that they can take. So honest feedback is certainly a crucial skill and a message that people would want to hear.
Great, thank you, Andrew. Let me just close this out. So moving on swiftly, so we have another 15 minutes that we'd like to use with another breakout session of 10 minutes. So you've heard a lot of different ideas today. So we started thinking about leadership in times of COVID-19, what impact perhaps the situation has had on you personally. We've thought about what we see good and bad leaders doing. We've had a couple of examples of different leadership styles that Donald presented back there. And we had a look at the sort of top 4 things that leaders could be doing. Now in this next breakout session, this is an opportunity to reflect on your own style. May it be a leadership style or maybe as member of a team. So what will you experiment with going forward based on what you have heard in this session today? So what are some of the things that you want to try out to improve the situation for yourself and those around you? So Becca, if I could ask you to move people into groups again for 10 minutes. So hopefully today's discussions that you've had and the things that you've heard have either inspired you to do more of the good stuff, so being more considerate, more compassionate, reaching out more to others, or perhaps if you've already been doing that already, it's reassured you that you are absolutely on track and that you are doing the right things, and that you could perhaps also start, teaching others how to do these things as well. So thank you very, very much for being with us today. We will be doing a little bit of networking afterwards, sort of 15, 20 minutes if you want to stay around. If not, and you have to drop off, please feel free to do so also. Just wanted to call out a couple of upcoming events the British Chamber of Commerce have got on their agenda. So one of them is on July the 8th, the annual general meeting. We're still looking at the exact format of that, Becca, if I'm not mistaken. So will it be in person or online, depending on what the restrictions are at that time. And then there's a global event that I would like Jill very quickly to talk about, a very exciting opportunity for us as part of the wider British Chambers network. So Jill, if you could just talk about that one very briefly, that would be great.
Yes, I think you've said it, but we're part of the global network of British Chambers of Commerce around the world. So during this crisis, we've become more connected with them, and we get asked if we want to participate. So the Singapore one has got Jim Collins. Jim Collins of Good to Great, Great by Choice. He doesn't do many of these, but I think it's a 2.5-hour live event with questions and answers and keynote and workshop. And it's 30th of June, 5 o'clock, and all members should have received the email yesterday. So I just want to highlight that to you, 30th of June.
Fantastic. Thanks very much, Jill. Great. Well, with that, those of you who'd like to stay, perhaps we'll see you in one of the breakout rooms. Everybody else who needs to leave, have a fantastic day, and wishing you lots of inspiration and energy to get through the next few months of these interesting times, and hope to see you again very soon at one of our events. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.